Howdy my totally tubular sharkaholics. And today's video, howdy my totally tubular sharkaholics. Welcome back to the Shark Scale, year 4. And today's video, it's going to be on Shark's Paradise. You might have heard of Gangster's Paradise, but well before Gangster's Paradise, we had Shark's Paradise, a film from down under in Australia, a classic Ozploitation film. Came out long ago. But is it any good? It's a good question. Let's find out.
I'm down for that
Captain
one.
Alex.
Shark's Paradise takes place in Australia and is about a detective/cop. We see one of those party boats where everyone is having fun, and because this is a movie, somebody falls off the boat into the water. After they fall into the water, they are quickly killed by a shark. Well, the next day, the police station get a message from an anonymous person saying that this was just the beginning and that if they don't pay $2 million, then he will unleash his sharks onto the sea near the beach, and it will be Shark's Paradise with many more deaths to come. It's also summertime where the city needs to make its tourist money from the beaches, so it's up to our main character and his partners to stop this anonymous terrorist and prevent the sharks from coming. Have you seen Jaws? Yes? Oh, then you already know what's going to happen here. Well, the plot is all around pretty silly and feels more like a cop crime drama rather than a shark movie. It's incredibly predictable, basic, and generic, really. It's much less about the sharks and more about our heroes finding out who has the sharks and how to stop them. And sure, as a crime drama, it's not the worst I've ever seen. Devoted fans know the kind of crap I've seen for this channel, but even for the 80s, it was a very run-of-the-mill crime drama where our main character does detective work and he usually gets into fights and usually gets his ass beat, and then the main scumbag in charge is pretty obvious from the beginning of the movie. The main cast gets thrown off the case here at one point, and they still have to solve it anyway because they're just that dedicated to it. All the tropes really are here. The characters try to be memorable and quirky and just different from the norm, and I think they achieve it with very mixed results. I mean, I guess they were kind of memorable. The main character isn't very memorable, but his sidekicks are like cool, calm, collected veteran from America, and then also this woman who changes outfits and hairstyles every single scene. She was easily the best character in the movie, actually. There are some fun car chases and action sequences that could have been worse. I can say they definitely could have been worse. Sadly, it looks like this movie was filmed on a potato. And to my knowledge, this YouTube video of the movie seems to be like the only way to watch this movie. It doesn't seem the movie was ever released on even DVD, so this movie, by all accounts, should be lost to time, being a TV movie that was never actually released commercially, but someone was cool enough to actually upload it. The premise, characters, plot, and general pacing of the movie was fine. If anything, it was a little too fine. It was so fine that it came off as incredibly generic and standard. It did nothing to stand out in any way, even for the time. I guess the novelty was that it was Australians that make this kind of movie instead of Hollywood, but I mean, I really don't see much novelty. I mean, it doesn't really stand out from the pack. It still comes off as incredibly generic and bland for the most part. While it's not awful, stupid, or terribly paced, it doesn't do anything really good, leaving to this generally mediocre experience. Well, how about the sharks? This is Shark's Paradise, after all. Well, the sharks aren't really very good either. They show up a few times in the movie, but they aren't memorable in the slightest. They look fine, I'm sure, and they actually film sharks or use B footage or B-roll or whatever, so that's fine. Even for the time, though, it wasn't anything special. They just kind of showed up and were there. They don't really do much. There are a few kills in the movie, but these are very few and far between. When they do happen, it's very standard, basic, and you don't even really see anything. The person just gets dragged underwater. There's barely anything to even comment on here. It's so forgettable and quick, there really is just little to comment on here, and I'm just gonna stop. It seems like a waste. It's clear the sharks were not the focus. This movie is a clear example of a movie with sharks in it, rather than a shark movie, because the sharks are in it so little. They don't add anything either. I mean, one of the main characters almost gets eaten. Wow. Most of the people that die in this movie are to our main heroes who gun people down who are trying to kill them. Okay, so if most of the movie is about the people, how is the acting? I mean, it's fine, I guess. I mean, I'm not really a good person to judge Australian acting. I mean, sure, they speak English, but their accents are usually able to hide potentially shoddy acting. I mean, I guess it gets a pass. Nobody seemed terrible or awful. Nobody was out of place, but nobody was really memorable or even close to it. Everyone was just kind of there. There isn't all that much to comment on. Like, nobody was enduring or close to engaging. That's really all I can say about this movie as a whole, is that it's very basic, generic, and all around just boring. It doesn't do anything unique, interesting, or different from any other crime drama or shark movie. Its plot, characters, acting, and sharks are all incredibly run-of-the-mill. And again, I think the appeal or like gimmick of this movie was that it was an Australian movie or an Ozploitation flick. And I'll be honest, I mean, that doesn't mean anything to me. Yeah, it's cool, it's got Australian people, and of course I love Australian people, but that doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things. This could have been any nationality, and it still would have been incredibly bland and generic. A good Australian movie that plays up to Australia's strengths would be like The Reef. That's a great Australian flick. Not this crap. This is a cookie-cutter, boring waste of time. Oh yeah, and a side note, there is terrible sound mixing present in this movie with the music. I felt the movie did nothing interesting and was ultimately incredibly forgettable. It wasn't like an awful train wreck of a movie, but instead it was a movie that I watched, and by the time the movie was over, I totally forgot about anything this movie had. And so I'm over here trying to write a review about it, and I'm like, what happened again? I'm gonna have to go back and look at clips of this movie because it was so forgettable. This is one of the most forgettable movies I've ever seen, like, period. And I wasn't even drinking a lot when this movie was going on, I promise, I really wasn't. It just does so little to stand out in its niche genre of shark movies that even I, the Sharkaholic, am stuck sitting here not really able to recall much about the movie at all. If that doesn't make it really obvious how I feel about this movie, I don't know what will. This movie gets a 1 out of 5 on the shark scale and is shark crap. Despite being neat that that you can even watch the movie in 2021, considering how obscure it is, it's a shame that it's not actually worth watching. It's really just a waste, and there really isn't anything to ever say about this movie ever again. After this video, you're never going to think of this movie again, and neither will I. Well, maybe I will one day for another video, but at this point in time, I never will again. Don't waste your time with this movie. Have a good one.